Dr. Charles Swindoll serves as Chancellor of Dallas Theological Seminary and Senior Pastor of Stonebriar Community Church in Frisco, Texas. Dr. Swindoll served Dallas Seminary well as the fourth president and is known by millions around the world for his practical application of the Bible to everyday living. He now serves Dallas Seminary as Chancellor and is currently the Senior Pastor of Stonebriar Community Church. Dr. Swindoll is the author of more than 50 books and is the featured Bible teacher on the popular radio program Insight for Living, which is aired nearly 2,000 times daily worldwide. He and his wife Cynthia reside here in the Metroplex and love to spend time with their 4 grown children and 10 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren? 5 great-grandchildren. So, Dr. Swindoll, we want you to know, we have said this publicly, but want to say again how much we appreciate you. In recent weeks, we have spent a great deal of time praying for your wife, Cynthia. For those of you that do not know, has gone through some very significant back surgery, and as I heard you say even this morning, is having a slow but steady recovery. So we continue to lift her up in prayer. Would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Swindoll today?
You had a mouthful there. Thank you for your prayers for Cynthia. She went through spinal surgery. It was a 9.5-hour procedure followed by 7 days in the hospital at the intensive care, and then 2 weeks of rehab, and now home. And you're looking at her very tired caregiver. No, as a matter of fact, I chose that purposely, and I don't know that I've ever felt closer to her than I have in these last nine weeks. It really does bond you together. And I'm serious here, I would recommend it. If you have a chance to get someone else to care for the one who's ill, or you do it, that is your partner in life, I would encourage you to do it. You'll really, really get to know not only her or him, but yourself a whole lot better. Which brings me to a subject that I want to talk about. And I want to be careful how I frame it, lest you get the wrong impression. During this semester, I want to address the things that prepare us for ministry that we don't learn at the seminary through the curriculum. So let me take you back to January 53 years ago. That would be January of 1963. I was in the middle of my last year, and the first 3.5 years had been really rather smooth and free from much interruption, virtually no illness in the family, no serious accidents. We had lost a baby and had grieved that. We had been, by the grace of God, allowed to enjoy the birth of our firstborn, a boy. And Cynthia was at that time carrying our second child, really our third, but the second to live. And we were in Houston on rather slick, icy streets in that cold January of 63. And we had finished with our worship at our church, and we were on our way to my folks' home in East Houston, which was about a 40-minute drive, and so we wanted to be careful. This was before there were seat belts and padded infant seats, and so your kids stood up next to you in the front seat of the car. They loved it, but it was a dumb idea. Anyway, we were hit broadside by a drunk driver who was traveling, they figured, about 50 miles an hour. And I only remember a flash and Cynthia screaming, and our son was thrown into the windshield, broke his jaw. Cynthia was thrown into the steering wheel and gear shift and began to hemorrhage and continued to do so through the rest of that pregnancy. I hit my head on the glass and broke it, and the car was totaled, 1957 vehicle, and the man who hit us broke his back. So it was a serious accident. A lot of it is kind of a blur when things like that happen that are so treacherous and fast. You don't recall much about the moment, but I knew the ones I loved the most needed help. And we got to the hospital and knew no one, and there were no cell phones to call home. So I found a phone there and got a hold of my folks and told them I didn't know when or if we'd ever even get there. I was coming back for my last semester, as some of you are in your last year at the school. And felt unusually alone. It was the first of a series of what I will call, simply for lack of a better word, obstacles that are placed in our lives by a sovereign God who knows that we are in need of a part of our training that cannot be learned from textbooks and faculty members or even an academic setting. As I recall, I was taking 15 hours. Thankfully, I'd written my thesis, so that was behind me. But I had no idea what we would be facing. We thought, sure, we'd lose another baby. And, of course, that was grievous to us, and especially to Cynthia. And so she's bedridden for the rest of that semester. Of course, we had no money. It's part of the qualifications for coming to seminary is you have no money, and we had no car, and we really had no that much closeness with that many students, I'm sad to say. In fact, always will remember this, when we stood and got in line for our graduation ceremony. And those days you sat in alphabetical order in Schaefer Chapel for all of the chapel services, which were required 5 days a week or 4 days a week. And so you're sat near each other, around each other. And I remember the fellow behind me, in those days it was all men. And so it was one man said to the man in front of me, now what would you say your name was? This is after 4 years at a school where he sat 2 seats away. I should have known then the value of relationships, which we had not cultivated. It wasn't encouraged at the school that much. It was mainly academics. And there was no department that was set aside for spiritual formation. There was really very little talk of it. The closest we got to it was the subject called discipleship, which I much prefer mentoring, but there was none of that. And so I suppose we realized at that moment a part of our education that we had missed. I say none of this blaming anyone. Back then, it was so different than life today. And I treasure my years at the school. You've heard me say that enough to know that that is my conviction. But I regret the lack of closeness. God granted us the birth of our baby and a little girl, and I thought that was just perfect. 2 children. That's it. Alpha, Omega. The beginning and the ending. Then we moved to New England, and snows a lot up there. And another pregnancy happens. And I could go on and on. God gave us 4, and I can't imagine not having those now adult children in our lives, how valuable they are. A son, a daughter, and a son. We were here briefly to finish the semester. I went on to be an assistant to Dr. Pentecost for 2.5, 3 years, and then went to New England for a couple of years, came back to Irving for 4 years, and then we moved to California for the next 23 years, and then back here. Many of you know my story, so that's not what this is about. What I want to say is, the academics have helped me all through my seminary, all through my ministry years. And I draw on them all the time, so take heart, faculty members. Your role is invaluable, and others of you sitting around in this room. But I want to say to all of you who are students that there are other things in ministry from which you will learn about ministry without the help of any faculty member or textbook or classroom. It will be what I am going to call life's obstacles. I believe that obstacles are par for the course. I believe they are essential. And I believe they are the reason we come to verses like 1 Corinthians 15:58. And we not only memorize the verse, as I did long before I came to seminary, but we dig into it to find meaning in it. I want us to look at it together. I want to dissect it a little, and then I want to take this subject of obstacles much further as I share with you 4 essentials for ministry. Look at the verse, 15:58. It's a summary verse, which is why the first word is what it is. This is the greatest chapter I know of in the New Testament on the subject of the resurrection. It ends with a climax as we have studied it and we believe it to be true, when the dead are raised imperishable and we begin a life of eternity with our God. And he comes to the end where, oh, death, where is your sting? Oh, death, where is your victory? I often say that Paul didn't get that from Shakespeare. Shakespeare got that from God, from Paul. And then after the victory, he says, therefore. And now, as Paul often does when he comes to the climax of a great doctrinal treatise, he hammers home some practical words. Look at the words closely. I'm going to be a little pedantic as I unfold the meaning. Therefore, my beloved brothers and sisters, be steadfast. It's not the idea of continuing in steadfastness, because I don't believe they were at the time he wrote it steadfast. He's saying, in effect, prove yourself to be steadfast. It's the idea of going there and remaining there, being firmly and fully settled in. Settle down solidly in the faith. They still had much to learn in both belief and behavior. So he says to them, settle in. This is a solid, personal conviction that is settled firmly against every assault. And it must be our first response to the heavenly truth revealed to us, writes Linsky. So the first essential for ministry is a steadfastness. You cultivate that over the long haul. Every test is a part of your learning steadfastness. Every event that is shocking and disappointing is all a part of driving you to a more settled, steadfast firmness in your faith. Be steadfast. The next word is a hapaxlegomena. Only time it appears in all of the New Testament, it is rendered immovable. They are not to allow themselves to be loosed from their moorings, writes one competent scholar. It is the idea of tireless diligence, immovable. When the obstacles occur, you're immovable. You press through them. Remember the words in Hebrews 13:9, not to be carried away by varied and strange teachings. For it is good for the heart to be strengthened. The idea is to be established by grace. Here you get tools. Here you get information. Here you get strong theological truth. From every angle it can come. You wrestle with it. You think it through. And in the process of grasping the truth, Paul would say, become immovable in it. Every place you go for ministry will have the temptation to loosen your grip on the truth. Every place. Every church you serve will have people who will test your mettle. Every situation will come out realistically with a dark side as well as a bright side. Staying immovable is not a nice option. It is an essential for ministry. Be steadfast, immovable. One of our collegians said to me, I forget when she returned from which semester at our church, she said, it's always great to come back. Because she said, I realize I'm exposed to a lot of things, and when I come back to my home church, I'm going to hear from a man who is settled in his convictions. And I took that as a real compliment. I am, and I'm grateful for that. I am open to truth if it is truth, and to new ways to look at truth, but the basics of the truth, I'm immovable. I've decided it is the place to be, and I'm comfortable there. More importantly, I'm stabilized there. So I urge you to be one known for immovability, established in your convictions. Remember the words I told you that Dr. Walford said when we graduated. My concern for you men is that you are graduating with many beliefs, but not enough convictions. A lot of truth in that. With your beliefs, and you will have them honed and broadened and challenged and stretched, make sure with them that you cultivate a set of convictions. There'll be convictions about the horizontal part of life, regarding relationships with others, regarding your home and family, convictions regarding your commitment to the church and to what God is doing in the church, convictions regarding the scriptures and the declaration of the scriptures. This world longs for a steady, immovable voice they can count on. When the book is opened, that they will hear, what does it say? What does it mean? How does it relate to me? And where does it touch me in areas that I need to apply it? Immovable. And now notice the third word, and you'll see it for yourself, is abounding. In fact, always abounding. Ministry is always to be carried out as more than just enough to get by. This is a strong admonition to those who work and serve and give and pray and model the message, that we excel in what we do. We don't just do it, we excel in it. That's why Paul wrote to Timothy to discipline yourself for the purpose of godliness. 1 Timothy 4:7. Discipline yourself. Show yourself an example. Give attention to. Don't neglect. Take pains. Pay close attention to. All of these are statements that follow those words at verse 7 of 1 Timothy 4. And I like the word always. Pantate is the term, and it's the idea here of constancy. Whether you're younger or you're getting up in years, abounding. When you're working with others and it's a joy, or whether you're working alone and you're slugging it out with a heavy heart, abounding. When it's pleasant and fruitful, or when it is unpleasant and times of unfruitfulness. I have a young man in our church who's going through a period, and he's so sincere and so wants to stay on top of things. And he wrote me an email and he said, I just need you to help me because I just need to know, do you ever feel unfruitful? You ever feel barren? And I was pleased to be able to write and say, of course I do. Of course I have seasons like that. And sometimes those times fall on Sundays. And I'm on. Now, I think you have to be wise in how you handle that. The pulpit isn't a couch. And so it's not a place for you to confess every one of the failures and faults that you're struggling with. But it is a good place for vulnerability. And I think acknowledging it and admitting it is healthy. Every person in this room knows what it is to go through periods of barrenness. And you may be in one right now. It doesn't make sense because you're beginning another semester. Well, maybe that does make sense. Depends on how things are here. Paul writes of it as being in season and out of season, reproving, rebuking, exhorting with all long-suffering and doctrine. You can just feel the passion, whether it's early or late, whether it's hot or cold, whether you are near home or miles away from home, whether they are with you or against you. Always abounding in the work of the Lord, whether you feel like it or you don't feel like it, when you're strongly motivated or when you find yourself weak and discouraged. I'm telling you, this is an essential part of ministry, and you won't get it from faculty members or textbooks or curricula. You'll get it from the living God, and often it will come to you delivered in the back door through obstacles. Things that are thrown up in your path that you didn't expect, and now you're left to deal with that. Say more about that after I get to this last part of the verse. Here is the reason you can do those first three. Steadfast, immovable, abounding. Here's how you can do it. Because you know that your toil is not in vain in the Lord. Kapos is the word he uses for toil. Hard work. Make no mistake about it. In spite of the popular opinion of the secular world, ministry is hard work. You are delivering your soul. You are preparing message after message. You are digging into an ancient text, delivering it to very real people who often haven't a clue about biblical truth. And you're making it as interesting as you can with as much passion as God can give you. And I'm telling you, that is work. That is hard work. Even if you're gifted, even if you're experienced, the work of doing quality ministry is hard work. Now, what do you know? You know that your work is not in vain. It is never, ever purposeless. The thing that makes it tough is that so much of ministry is spiritual and it's intangible. And the benefits are not, cannot be calculated. They can't be numbered. You're investing in the lives of others, and they more often than not will not tell you how beneficial it was, or how stabilizing it helped them to become, or how strong it made their marriage, or how convicting they were in their spirit when you addressed a subject that was very personal, even intimate. It's not in vain. It will yield a great harvest, and the results will, though invisible now, be ultimately rewarded by our faithful God. Count on it. Count on it. I've told you before, there are 19 steps that lead up to my study in my home. And every time I'm on my way up there, it's like I have a simple little prayer for each step. That when I get to that place of my study, which is kind of set apart, surrounded by my books, and that's in my study, and then next to it is a library with other research works, and I'm able to go there and pore over it and put my fingers on profs I never had the privilege of sitting under and reading what they have written, and other people who have gone through experiences that are beyond my own. Invaluable time, but I'll tell you, what we sang is right. Though this world with devils filled should threaten to undo us, we will not fear, for you have willed your truth to triumph through us. Prince of darkness, grim, we tremble not for him. I have a little caricature that someone gave me, a little painted red horns, little feet sticking out. It pops up and down. And originally, when you popped it up, it said, "Go to hell." That's what it originally said. My sister gave it to me and painted off that and painted into it, "Welcome." And, that's the enemy's message. Come on. Hey, come on. Lighten up. You're getting pretty intense for an old guy. Come on. Folks need a break. No, they don't need a break. We need truth. Deliver it for God's sake. You're spending 4 years getting it really cleared up in your head. You got 40, 50, 60 years to let the truth be known. Get it out there. But expect the enemy to hate it. You're learning that at school. I don't know of any, I've said this before, I don't know of a more dangerous place to be than Dallas Seminary. There may be, but I don't know of one more. I think the enemy is just, if we could see the demonic world, I think it would make us suck in our breath. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I really believe that. Some of you are going through temptations you never did before you came to seminary. Some of you are entertaining thoughts that were alien thoughts before you enrolled. Some of you, after being here a few years, are already getting caught in the cynicism, in the the vortex of cynicism, and your attitudes start to stink, and you won't admit it. Get it dealt with here. At least start getting it dealt with here. I came across an interesting book. It's called The Obstacle is the Way. It's written by an unbeliever, Ryan Holiday. So if you're going to buy it, be ready for a few words that you wouldn't hear from faculty members at Dallas Seminary. He throws in some profanity here and there, but he's on to something great. I'm intrigued by the title. The obstacle is the way. It's not the exception. Overcoming obstacles, he writes, is a discipline of 3 critical steps. 1, begins with how we look at our specific problems, our attitude, our approach. That's 1, perception. Number 2, the energy and creativity with which we actively break them down and turn them into opportunities. Boy, there's a lot of truth in that. So the idea of action, taking action with what is the obstacle. And then 3rd, the cultivation and maintenance of an inner will that allows us to handle defeat and difficulty. You are on your way to times of defeat and great difficulty. It's just, again, it's par for the course. I didn't know that when I graduated. I thought they would be rare and few and far between. I came to realize it's not true at all. Obstacles, he adds, are not only to be expected, but embraced for that reason. Because I think, as I have had him verify, that when you deal with obstacles correctly, you become steadfast, immovable. You begin to abound, knowing with confidence your work is not in vain. Couple of illustrations and I'm through. There was little evidence that Demosthenes was destined to become the greatest orator of Athens, let alone all of history. He was born sickly and frail with a nearly debilitating speech impediment. At 7 years old, he lost his father, and then things got worse. The large inheritance left to him, intended to pay for tutors in the best school, was stolen by his guardians, who had been entrusted to protect him. They refused to pay his tutors, depriving him of an education he was entitled to. And still weak and sick, Demosthenes was also unable to distinguish himself in another critical sphere of Greek life, the floor of the gymnasium. Here was this fatherless, effeminate, awkward child who no one understood, who everyone laughed at. Not exactly the boy you'd expect would soon hold the power to mobilize a nation by his voice alone. Disadvantaged by nature, abandoned by the people he depended on, nearly everything wrong that could be inflicted on the child befell Demosthenes. I'll cut to the chase. He heard a great orator and he thought, that's what I want to do. I mean, it would be the least you would think he would be interested in. To conquer his speech impediment, he devised his own strange exercises. He would fill his mouth with pebbles and practice speaking. He rehearsed full speeches into the wind and while running up steep inclines. He learned to give entire speeches with almost a single breath. Soon his quiet, weak voice erupted with booming, powerful clarity. He descended each day into his study to work with his voice, his facial expressions, and his arguments. Every moment, every conversation, every transaction was an opportunity for him to improve his art, his gift. All of it aimed at one goal, to face his enemies in court and win back what had been taken from him, which he did. Every speech he delivered made him stronger. Every day that he stuck with it made him more determined. Don't miss that sentence. You'll find that true. Every day you apply yourself fully with discipline to your calling will make you a better woman, a better man, a better minister. Every day. He could see through bullies and stare them down in fear. In struggling with his unfortunate fate, Demosthenes found his true calling. He would be the voice of Athens, its great speaker and conscience. He would be successful precisely because of what he had been through and how he had reacted to it. He had channeled his rage and pain into his training, and then later into his speeches, fueling it all with a kind of fierceness and power that could be neither matched nor resisted. He goes on and on to talk about it. Some of you have been deeply, deeply wounded. Your home was not what you would have longed for it to be. Quite likely you do not have the support of both parents, if either. And if you are not careful, you will lick those wounds so long that you will weaken what could be a very strong ministry as you overcome that obstacle. You had nothing to do with the choice of parents. God made no mistake. And admittedly, it is an obstacle you must find a way to overcome. And I will tell you again, you'll not get it from faculty members or textbooks or the curriculum. You will get it in life as you deal with obstacles, as you face yourself and all the ugly things that are there that need to be cleaned up, corrected, improved, changed. I had wanted to read more, but especially about Thomas Edison and what he spent to reach his goals. But this part of the story was fascinating. Listen to this. At age 67, Thomas Edison returned home early one evening from another day in the laboratory. Shortly after dinner, a man came rushing into his house with urgent news. A fire had broken out at Edison's research and production campus a few miles away. Fire engines from 8 nearby towns rushed to the scene, but they could not contain the blaze. Fueled by the strange chemicals and the various buildings, green and yellow flames shot up 6 to 7 stories, threatening to destroy the entire empire Edison had spent his life building. Get that. 67 years old, everything goes up in flames. Edison calmly but quickly made his way to the fire through the now hundreds of onlookers and devastated employees. He was looking for his son. Once he found him, "Go get your mother and tell her to bring her friends. They'll never see a fire like this again," was his response. "What?" asked Holliday. "Don't worry," Edison calmed him. He said, "It's all right. We just got rid of a lot of rubbish." There's a pretty amazing reaction when you think, but when you think about it, there really is no other response. What should Edison have done? Wept, gotten angry, quit, gone home? It's an obstacle. It's an impassable, humanly speaking, impossible barrier to what he thought would be his future, when in fact, if you know his story, it all turns around, and that led to do a number of other inventions. It got him to the place where he could make $1 million a week back then. He didn't let it ruin him. I don't know where you are. I don't know what obstacle it is. I don't know what thing you tend to fall back on as an excuse. But I'm here today to urge you to remember that the obstacle is the way. I want to go further. It has made me into the man I am today. The obstacles. As great as my training, as wonderful as my family, and as dear as I have cultivated relationships with individuals, nothing like obstacles that have forced me to come to terms with essentials and led me ultimately to where I am today by the grace of God. You know what else happens in the process? There is absolutely no room for pride. When you've gotten there by way of obstacles, what's there to be proud of? All you did was work through obstacles. A grandson and I, Austin, was with me day before yesterday, and we were in my study, and we were talking, and he was looking at some books, and some had my name on it, and he said, boy, Baba, he said, they kind of make you proud. And I said, what? What would make me proud? I got 4 adult kids. I got you 10 grandkids. You have a way of cutting a guy down to size. Isaac Watts, as far back as the 18th century, put it this way. Am I a soldier of the cross, a follower of the Lamb, and shall I fear to own his cause or blush to speak his name? Are there no foes for me to face? Must I not stem the flood? Is this vile world a friend of grace to help me on to God? Sure, I must fight if I would reign. Increase my courage, Lord. I'll bear the toil, endure the pain, supported by thy word. Are there no foes for me to face? Must I not stem the flood? You got foes ahead of you. You got an enemy that's stronger than you'll ever dream of being. He and his demonic forces know every chink in your armor, and he is not impressed. He despises you and your future. And he will cut in on your stride and turn you into a statistic just as quickly as you cooperate with him. Learn that soon. Learn it these days. And be steadfast, immovable, always abounding, knowing that your labor isn't in vain. Okay? Thanks for these dear men and women, Father. Gifted, called, on the cusp of years of ministry in places that they would never, ever guess right now. Thank you for the way you will use them. And I even thank you for the obstacles that will be a part of their journey. Guard them from trying to escape them or deny them or give in to them. May it build within them a discipline and a courage that will equip them for a lifetime of faithful service. For each one, I pray, right now. Each soldier of the cross, I commit to you in the name of Jesus. Everybody said,